My wife looked me dead in the eye across our kitchen table and said, "It is best if you do not come to the cottage this Christmas because I have been so difficult." She told me I make the children tense, so I spent the holiday alone in my massive house. But at exactly 12:12 a.m. on Christmas morning, my son called me panicking, screaming, "Dad, your name is on the global news app. What the hell did you do?" Before I tell you how I legally evicted my ungrateful family from a property they thought they owned, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to remind someone who actually pays the bills. The silence in the kitchen was heavy enough to crush a lesser man. It was 2 days before Christmas, and the Chicago winter was pressing against the frosted windows. I sat there with my hands wrapped around a warm ceramic mug, waiting for an explanation that I knew would be a lie. Cynthia, my wife of 12 years, placed her coffee cup down on the granite counter with a sharp clack that echoed in the high ceiling room. She did not look at me. She was looking at her manicured fingernails, inspecting them, as if they were more interesting than the husband she was about to discard for the holidays. "Garrison," she said, and her voice had that sharp edge she used when she was trying to mask a demand as a suggestion. "We have been talking, the kids and I. We think it is best if you stay here in Chicago this week. You do not need to come to the Lake Geneva cottage." I blinked slowly. The steam from my coffee drifted up between us. I looked past her to the doorway where my son Justin was standing. He is 38 years old, but in that moment, he looked like a terrified teenager. He was fiddling with the zipper of his designer jacket, refusing to meet my gaze. Beside him stood his wife Brittany, tapping away on her phone, clearly bored by the destruction of my dignity. "I am being difficult?" I asked, keeping my voice flat. "Yes, Garrison. Difficult." Cynthia snapped, finally looking up. Her eyes were cold. "You have been hovering lately. You ask too many questions about the grocery bills. You complain about the heating costs. You make Brittany uncomfortable. She needs space to relax, and honestly, so do I. We want a stress-free Christmas." I looked at Justin again. My own flesh and blood. The boy I had put through private schools and bailed out of 3 failed startups. I waited for him to defend me. I waited for him to say that Christmas is for family, and that his father belongs at the head of the table. Instead, he muttered something into his chest. "Dad, honestly, Brittany has had a hard year. She just needs some good vibes. You know how you get about the finances. It kills the mood." There it was, the truth wrapped in a pathetic excuse. They did not want me there because I had started asking where the money was going. I was the wallet, not the father. I was the ATM machine that had recently started asking for a receipt. I did not argue. I did not raise my voice. I learned a long time ago in the boardroom that when someone shows you their hand, you do not scream, you just fold and wait for the next deal. "Fine," I said, taking a slow sip of my coffee. "If I am a burden, I will stay here. You all go. Enjoy the cottage." Cynthia smiled, and it was a smile of pure victory. She thought the old man had finally given up. She thought I was too tired to fight. She walked over and gave me a quick, performative peck on the cheek. It felt like ice. "Thank you for being reasonable, Garrison," she said. "We will call you on Christmas Day." They did not waste a second. Within 10 minutes, I heard the heavy thud of suitcases being dragged down the hallway. They had already packed before they even told me. They knew I would agree because they think I am weak. I watched from the kitchen window as they loaded up the black SUV. Justin threw the bags in with a vigor I rarely saw him use for actual work. Brittany was already in the passenger seat, checking her reflection in the visor mirror. Cynthia took the wheel. They drove out of the gate without looking back once. I stood there in the empty kitchen of a house that felt too big for one man. They left me alone for Christmas. But as the taillights disappeared around the corner, I did not feel sad. I felt a cold clarity settling in my chest. They thought they were leaving a difficult old man behind. They had no idea they had just walked away from their only safety net. The house was silent, but my mind was racing. I poured the rest of my coffee down the sink. I did not need caffeine. I needed adrenaline. My phone buzzed in my pocket against my leg. I pulled it out, expecting a text from Justin, maybe a half-hearted apology, or a request to water the plants. It was a notification from American Express. Your supplementary card ending in 4009 has been charged $5,200 at Cartier Jewelry. I stared at the screen. The car had left my driveway less than 20 minutes ago. They had not even made it to the highway yet, and Justin was already burning through my credit limit. $5,000. That was not a purchase for a relaxing holiday. That was a celebration. They were celebrating their freedom. They were celebrating the fact that the old man was not there to ask why they needed another diamond bracelet when they could barely pay their own rent. I tapped the screen to dismiss the notification, but another one popped up immediately. This one was from the private banking app. Cash withdrawal alert. $10,000. Location Shell gas station ATM. Cynthia. She was maxing out the daily cash withdrawal limit at a gas station. Who needs $10,000 in cash for a quiet weekend at a family cottage? You only need that kind of cash if you are paying people who do not take credit cards, or if you are planning to do things you do not want traced on a statement. I walked into the living room and looked at the family portrait hanging above the fireplace. It was taken 5 years ago. We all looked happy. I looked like the proud patriarch. Now looking at it, I realized I looked like a mark. A victim. They were not going to Lake Geneva to relax. They were going to feast on my carcass. They thought I was senile. They thought I was just a retired logistics manager who got lucky with some stocks. They had forgotten who I really was. I am Garrison Ford. I built Ford Logistics from a single truck into a continental empire before I sold it 10 years ago. I did not survive hostile takeovers and union strikes to be robbed blind by a yoga instructor's best student and a son who cannot tough out a crypto crash. I walked to the hallway closet and pushed aside the heavy winter coats that smelled of mothballs. At the back of the closet was a door that looked like it led to a utility crawl space. It had a simple keyhole, but that was just for show. I placed my palm flat against a panel in the drywall to the right. A hidden scanner read my print, and the door clicked open with a heavy magnetic thud. Cynthia thought this was where I kept my old tax boxes and broken golf clubs. She never came down here because it was dusty and dark. I stepped inside and the motion sensors triggered the LED strips along the floor. This was not a storage room. This was my command center. The room was climate-controlled, humming with the soft sound of server fans. A bank of 365-inch monitors dominated the far wall. I sat down in my leather chair and woke the system up. My fingers flew across the mechanical keyboard. I might be 72, but I wrote the code for my company tracking systems back in the 80s. I know technology better than my son, who thinks the cloud is magic. I logged into the master control server. The screen flashed green. Connection established. Ford Estate Network. When I bought the cottage at Lake Geneva 20 years ago, I did not just buy a house. I bought a fortress. I installed military-grade security cameras in every room except the bathrooms and bedrooms. I put microphones in the common areas. I did it for security against intruders. I never thought the intruders would be my own family. Cynthia told me last year that the cameras were broken. She said a storm had knocked them out. I told her I was too old and tired to fix them, so they were just dummy cameras now. She believed me. I typed in the command to override the sleep mode on the remote servers in Wisconsin. One by one, the screens on my wall flickered to life. Camera 1 driveway. Camera 2 living room. Camera 3 wine cellar. Camera 4 lakeside patio. The feed was crystal clear. 4K resolution. I could see snowflakes drifting down onto the driveway of the cottage. I leaned back and watched. 20 minutes later, the black SUV pulled into the long driveway. But they were not alone. A second car pulled in right behind them. A red convertible Porsche. I frowned. Who the hell was driving a convertible in December in Wisconsin? The car doors opened. Justin jumped out and ran to the trunk of the SUV. Brittany stepped out and immediately lit a cigarette, flicking the ash onto my pristine snow. But my eyes were fixed on the Porsche. A man stepped out. He was tall, fit, and looked to be about 40 years old. He was wearing a tight muscle shirt under an open shearling coat. I recognized him immediately. Gavin. Cynthia, personal yoga instructor. The man she claimed helped her with her back pain 3 times a week. I watched in silence as Cynthia walked over to him. She did not shake his hand. She did not wave. She wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him. It was not a friendly kiss. It was the kind of kiss you give a lover you have been waiting to see all day. My stomach turned. I watched my son Justin walk past them carrying a cooler. He saw his stepmother kissing another man, and he did not even blink. He high-fived Gavin as he walked by. "Hey Gav, glad you made it, bro," Justin said. The microphone on the porch picked it up perfectly. "Yeah, man, would not miss the party," Gavin replied. They knew. My son knew. His wife knew. They were all in on it. They had brought her lover to my house for Christmas. They had kicked me out so they could play happy family with the man who was spending my money. They all walked into the house laughing. I switched the audio feed to the living room. "Wow, this place is huge," Gavin said, spinning around, looking at the timber beams and the stone fireplace. "I can see why you married the old geezer Sin. This is prime real estate." "It will be ours soon, baby," Cynthia said, pulling off her coat and tossing it onto my leather armchair. "Just be patient. Once we get the power of attorney, we can sell this dump and buy that villa in Tuscany." Dump. She called an $8 million estate a dump. Gavin walked over to the wine rack. He pulled out a bottle. I squinted at the screen. My heart stopped. It was a 1982 Petrus, a bottle worth more than Gavin's yearly income. "Is this the good stuff?" he asked. "Who cares?" Justin yelled from the kitchen. "Open it. The old man is not here to count the drops." I watched Gavin uncork a $5,000 bottle of wine and pour it into a red plastic solo cup. He took a swig like it was cheap beer and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Not bad," he grunted. I felt a cold rage settle over me. It was not the wine. I can buy 1,000 bottles of wine. It was the disrespect. It was the absolute contempt they had for me. I turned away from the camera feed and opened a new window on my central monitor. It was time to look at the numbers. If they were spending $10,000 in cash today, I needed to know what else they had done. I accessed the forensic accounting software I use for my trust. I pulled up the last 6 months of activity for every account linked to my Social Security number and the family trust. The screen filled with red flags. It was a bloodbath. I scrolled through the transactions. Cynthia had categorized withdrawals under home repairs. $450,000 in 6 months. I checked the contractor names. They were shell companies. LLCs registered to P.O. boxes in Nevada. There were no repairs. The house looked exactly the same. She was siphoning cash. I looked at Justin's accounts. I had given him access to a trading account for his education. It was empty. $200,000 gone. The transaction logs showed transfers to obscure crypto exchanges that had collapsed months ago. He had gambled it all away and never said a word. Then I found the payments to Dr. Park. Dr. Samuel Park, geriatric psychiatry, $5,000 a month for consulting fees. I do not have a psychiatrist. I have never met a Dr. Park. I dug deeper into Cynthia Cloud storage, which was synced to the family server she thought was just for movies. I found a drafts folder in her email. There was an email addressed to Dr. Park attached with a PDF document. I opened the PDF. It was a draft petition for involuntary guardianship due to incapacitation. The document outlined a series of fabricated incidents. It claimed I left the stove on. It claimed I got lost driving to the store. It claimed I was becoming violent and paranoid. It was dated for January 2nd. They were not just going to rob me. They were planning to lock me away. They were going to stand in front of a judge in 10 days and say I was crazy so they could take the keys to the kingdom. I looked back at the camera feed. They were sitting on my couches, toasting with my wine, laughing at my expense. Justin was showing Gavin something on his phone, probably the bracelet he just bought with my money. They looked so confident, so secure. They thought the game was over and they had won. I leaned forward and cracked my knuckles. My hands were not shaking anymore. They wanted to play games with the difficult old man. Fine. I checked the time. It was 4 p.m. on December 23rd. I picked up my secure phone and dialed a number I had not called in years. It rang twice, Mercer Law Firm. The voice answered. It was crisp and professional. "This is Garrison Ford," I said. "Get Mercer on the line. Tell him I need to activate the Omega protocol." There was a pause. The receptionist voice dropped an octave. "Mr. Ford, we thought you were retired." "I was," I said, watching Gavin put his feet up on my coffee table. "But I am coming out of retirement for one last job. Put him on." I waited for the lawyer to pick up. On the screen, Cynthia was dancing to loud music, holding her red cup. She looked free. She had no idea that in less than 8 hours, her entire world was going to freeze over. I was about to ruin Christmas in a way they would talk about in therapy for the rest of their miserable lives. I opened the banking control panel. I found the credit limit settings for the supplementary cards. Justin card. Cynthia card. Even the emergency card I gave Brittany. I did not cancel them. That would be too easy. Canceling them sends a fraud alert. It gives them an excuse. Instead, I highlighted the credit limit field. It was currently set to no limit. I typed in a new number. $500. I hit enter. The system updated instantly. Mercer came on the line. "Garrison, it has been a long time. Omega protocol. That is the nuclear option. Who is the target?" I watched my family on the screen. Everyone I said. "I want you to draft the eviction notices. And Mercer, I need you to call the contacts at the Nature Conservancy. I have a donation to make." "A donation?" Mercer asked. "Yes," I said. "I am giving away the cottage. Tonight." I hung up the phone and settled in. The show was just starting. They were going to a fancy dinner tonight. I knew because I could see the reservation confirmation on Justin's email. The check would be at least $3,000, and they had a combined credit limit of $500. I poured myself a glass of whiskey neat. "Merry Christmas, family," I whispered to the screen. "Let the games begin." The taillights of the SUV had barely faded from view when my phone vibrated against my thigh. It was a sharp, aggressive buzz that shattered the silence of the empty house. I pulled it out, expecting a text from Justin, perhaps a delayed apology, or a request to water the plants he had ignored for months. Instead, the screen lit up with a notification from American Express. "Your supplementary card ending in 4009 has been charged $5,200 at Cartier." I stared at the numbers. $5,200. They had not even been gone for 20 minutes. They were likely still navigating city traffic, and Justin was already burning through my credit limit. I walked into the kitchen and poured the rest of my coffee down the sink. The dark liquid swirled away just like my patience. Cartier. Justin was not buying a gift for me. He was buying a trophy for himself, or perhaps an apology gift for Brittany to keep the peace. It did not matter what it was. What mattered was the audacity. They had told me I was difficult. They had told me I was a source of tension. Yet they had no problem taking my wallet along for the ride. I realized then that they were not going to the cottage to relax. They were going to celebrate. This was a victory lap. They had successfully cut the old man out of the picture, and now they were going to enjoy the spoils of war without my judgment hanging over them. I dialed the number on the back of my card. Not the general customer service line, but the direct line for private wealth clients. It rang once. Mr. Ford, a smooth voice answered. "This is Jonathan. How can I help you today?" "Jonathan," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. "I just received a transaction alert. I want to know if there is any other recent activity on the supplementary cards." "One moment, sir. Let me pull up the real-time data." I listened to the faint clicking of a keyboard. The house felt massive around me. My footsteps echoed on the hardwood as I paced the living room. "I see the Cartier charge pending on Justin Card," Jonathan said. "And there was a charge for $300 at a liquor store 10 minutes prior. $300 on liquor. They were stocking up for a party I was specifically excluded from." "Is there anything else?" I asked. "Yes, Mr. Ford. It looks like there was a significant cash withdrawal just moments ago." My grip on the phone tightened. "Which card?" "It was on the card issued to Cynthia Ford. A withdrawal of $10,000 at a Shell station ATM." I stopped pacing. $10,000. That was the daily maximum for cash advances. Why would Cynthia need that kind of cash for a weekend trip to a fully stocked cottage? You use credit cards for dinners and gifts. You use cash for things you do not want traced. $10,000, I repeated. "Yes, sir. Since it is a high-value cash transaction at a non-bank ATM, it triggered a security flag. We were about to call you to authorize it. Did you make this withdrawal?" "No," I said. "But do not decline it. Let it go through." I hung up the phone. My hand was shaking not from age but from a cold, hard fury. $10,000 in cash, $5,000 at Cartier, and they had not even left the city limits yet. They were bleeding me dry, and they were doing it with a smile. I looked at the family portrait hanging above the fireplace. It was a lie. All of it. I was not the patriarch. I was the prey. And they had just taken the first bite. But they had made a mistake. They assumed I was just a senile old man who would sit at home and watch television while they spent my fortune. They forgot that I built that fortune by seeing things others missed. I walked to the hallway closet and pushed aside the heavy winter coats. At the back was a door that looked like a utility access panel. I placed my palm against the scanner hidden in the drywall. It beeped once and the door clicked open, revealing the staircase to the basement. It was time to go to work. I pushed aside the heavy wool coats that smelled of cedar and neglect, stepping past the threshold of what my family thought was a deep storage closet. To Cynthia, this was just the junk room, a place for old tax returns and broken golf clubs she was too lazy to throw out herself. I let her believe that. I had built a false wall out of plywood and stacked boxes of useless papers floor to ceiling, creating a claustrophobic tunnel that discouraged anyone from looking deeper. But I knew exactly which brick in the back wall was loose. I pressed my thumb against the biometric scanner hidden behind it. A soft chime echoed a sound only I could hear, and the heavy steel door disguised as drywall slid open with a pneumatic hiss. I stepped inside and the atmosphere changed instantly. The air here was cool, crisp, and sterile, conditioned to a precise 65 degrees to protect the hardware. The smell of dust was replaced by the ozone scent of high-end electronics. This was not a storage room. This was the brain of my operation. I sat down in the leather command chair, the material creaking softly under my weight. In front of me, a bank of 3 curved monitors sat dark and dormant. My family thought I was just a retired logistics manager, a man who had made a decent living and got out of the game early. They had no idea I was the architect of the tracking systems that still move half the freight in this country. When I sold Ford Logistics a decade ago, I kept the most important asset for myself. I kept the root access. I still controlled the servers, the encryption keys, and the digital infrastructure. I was not just a pensioner watching daytime television. I was a ghost in the machine I built. I woke the system. The screens flared to life, bathing the room in a cold blue glow. Lines of code scrolled down the center monitor, a language I spoke better than English. I bypassed the corporate firewalls and navigated to my private network. I needed eyes on the ground. I needed to see what they were doing when they thought the difficult old man was not watching. I typed in the coordinates for the Lake Geneva property. The cottage. My wife loved that house because she thought it was a status symbol. She loved showing it off to her friends. But she hated the upkeep. Last year, after a summer thunderstorm tripped the alarms, she demanded I fix the security system. I told her the lightning had fried the motherboard, and it would cost $50,000 to replace. I told her I was too cheap to pay it. She called me a miser and a fool, and she believed the cameras were dead. She believed the microphones were just useless plastic now. She was wrong. I never let my security go offline. I had simply disabled the local chimes and rerouted the feed to this room. I had been waiting for a reason to watch. I entered the command to override the standby mode. Accessing remote node Lake Geneva. Status online. On the center screen, a grid of black boxes flickered. Then one by one they resolved into crystal clear, high-definition video feeds. The driveway dusted with fresh snow. The great room with its vaulted timber ceilings. The kitchen where Cynthia would soon be drinking my wine. The camera status light blinked green. The feed was live. They were walking into a house that was not a home but a stage, and I had the best seat in the house. The monitors flickered, stabilizing into a crisp image of the snow-covered driveway. I leaned closer to the screen, my breath catching in my throat, as the black SUV I paid for rolled to a stop. Its engine heat shimmered in the winter air, but it was not alone. A sleek cherry-red sports car pulled in right behind it, aggressive and out of place in the rustic setting. I did not recognize the vehicle. I felt a spike of adrenaline. Who else was coming to my private retreat? The driver door of the sports car opened. A man stepped out. He was younger than me by 30 years, fit, wearing tight designer jeans and a shearling coat left open to show off his physique. I knew him. It was Gavin. The man Cynthia called her spiritual wellness coach. The man she paid $200 an hour to help her stretch. Cynthia stepped out of the SUV. She did not wave or shake his hand. She walked straight into his arms. He grabbed her waist, pulling her flush against him, and kissed her on the mouth. It was not a greeting between friends. It was a claim of ownership. I sat in my dark basement watching my wife cheat on me in high-definition resolution. But that was not the knife that twisted in my gut. The real blade came next. My son Justin hopped out of the SUV. He saw them. He saw his stepmother in the arms of another man, and he smiled. He walked over to Gavin and clasped his hand in a bro hug, slapping him on the back. Brittany followed, laughing, lighting a cigarette, and flicking the ash onto my driveway. They were not surprised. They were not angry. They were a team. My son had traded his father dignity for a seat at the cool table. He was selling me out to keep the peace with the woman controlling the purse strings. He accepted his stepmother infidelity as the price of admission to the party. They moved inside. I switched the feed to camera 3, the great room. They threw their coats on my antique furniture. Gavin looked around like he owned the place, spinning on his heel, admiring the timber beams I had paid for. "Nice shack," I heard him say through the microphones. Garrison really knew how to spend money before he lost his mind. Cynthia laughed, a sound I had not heard in years. "Make yourself at home, babe," she said. "The cellar is unlocked." Gavin did not hesitate. He walked to the climate-controlled wine rack. My eyes narrowed. He bypassed the table wines. He reached for the top shelf. His hand closed around the neck of a 1982 Chateau Margaux, a bottle I had been saving for Justin. 40th birthday. A bottle worth more than Gavin Carr. "Is this the good stuff?" Gavin asked, reading the label with a squint. "Who cares?" Justin shouted from the kitchen. "Just pop it. The old man is not here to check the inventory." I watched in horror as Gavin grabbed a corkscrew. He did not decant it. He did not let it breathe. He grabbed a stack of cheap red plastic party cups from the counter. With a wet pop, the cork came out. He tilted the bottle, glugging the dark ruby liquid into the plastic cup, like it was discount fruit punch. He took a swig, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, and belched. "Not bad," he grunted. "Tastes like grapes." I turned my chair away from the wall of monitors, unable to watch that stranger swallow another mouthful of my vintage wine. The visual evidence was sickening, but I needed the hard data. I needed to know exactly how deep the rot went. My fingers flew across the mechanical keyboard, pulling up the forensic accounting dashboard I had built to monitor the family trust. I had ignored the automated flags for months, telling myself I was just being paranoid, being difficult, just like they said. Now I ripped the bandage off. The screen filled with red lines. It was a financial massacre. I drilled down into the last 6 months of transactions. The operating account for the house maintenance was hemorrhaging cash. Cynthia had categorized nearly $200,000 under home repairs and landscaping. I clicked on the vendor details. There were no contractors, no landscapers. The money was being funneled to a Shell LLC registered in Nevada, which then wired funds to a luxury wellness retreat in Sedona and a boutique jeweler in downtown Chicago. She was not fixing the roof, she was buying a new life. I switched to Justin's sub-account. I had given him access to a capital fund for what he claimed was a tech startup. The ledger showed zero revenue. Instead, I saw a stream of outgoing wires to offshore crypto exchanges that had collapsed months ago, and huge deposits to online sports betting sites. My son was not an entrepreneur. He was a degenerate gambler who had torched $250,000 of his inheritance before I was even dead. Total misappropriated funds in 180 days, $450,000. I sat back, the leather creaking under the weight of my realization. They were not just spending my money. They were looting the ship before sinking it. But then I saw it. A recurring monthly payment of $5,000 from the joint checking account. It was labeled simply Dr. Park Consulting. I do not have a consultant named Dr. Park. I do not have a doctor named Dr. Park. I needed to know who this man was. I remembered Cynthia had left her old tablet in the library upstairs, claiming the battery was dead. But that tablet was synced to our home cloud server. I did not need the physical device. I accessed her cloud backup directly from my terminal. I scrolled through her notes and draft emails. My heart hammered against my ribs as I opened a draft saved just yesterday. The subject line read, "Urgent filing instructions." I opened the attachment. It was a legal petition titled, "Involuntary Guardianship Due to Incapacitation." I read the first paragraph, and my blood ran cold. It outlined a plan to declare me mentally unfit, citing fabricated instances of memory loss and aggression. It claimed I was a danger to myself and others. And at the bottom was the signature of Dr. Samuel Park, a geriatric psychiatrist. I had never met. They were not just stealing from me. They were planning to have me committed. They were going to lock me away in a facility and take the keys to the empire I built. I stared at the document. The date for filing was January 2nd. They were giving me one last Christmas before they buried me alive. I stared at the digital signature on the guardianship petition for a long moment. My own wife and son were not just ungrateful. They were conspirators in a coup. I closed the window and picked up the heavy black receiver of the encrypted landline on my desk. This phone only dialed one number. It rang once. "Garrison." The voice on the other end was deep, gravelly, and devoid of surprise. It was Mercer. He had been my general counsel for 30 years. He knew where the bodies were buried because he had usually dug the holes. They made their move, I said. My voice sounded strange in the quiet room. Cold, detached. I see, Mercer replied. I assume you found the draft for the competency hearing. My sources told me they reached out to Dr. Park last week. I was waiting for you to see it for yourself. You knew I asked. I suspected, Mercer corrected. But suspicion is not evidence. Now you have evidence. So the question is simple, Garrison. What is the objective here? Do we fire a warning shot across the bow to scare them straight? Or do we sink the ship? I looked up at the wall of monitors. I saw my wife laughing with her lover. I saw my son pouring another glass of my wine. I saw the people I had protected for decades preparing to erase me. There is no ship, I said. Burn it all down, Mercer. Scorched earth. I want them destitute. I want them homeless. I want them to understand the definition of zero. Understood, Mercer said. The clicking of a mechanical keyboard began on his end, a rapid staccato rhythm like gunfire. I am initiating the asset freeze protocols now. I am drafting the revocations for the trust access. I am preparing the transfer deeds for the Lake Geneva property to the government. That will take effect at midnight. Good, I said. And the Chicago house? Sealed, Mercer said. I will have a private security team there within the hour to change the locks and secure the perimeter. When they come back from their little vacation, they will not get past the front gate. The clicking stopped suddenly. There was a heavy silence on the line. Garrison, Mercer said, and his tone had shifted. It was no longer the confident tone of a lawyer in attack mode. It was hesitant. What is it? I asked. I am looking at the latest title search for the downtown penthouse. The one Justin and Brittany live in. The one you hold the deed to. I know the one, I said. I bought it cash 5 years ago. It is in my name. They just pay the utilities. Not anymore, Mercer said quietly. It seems Justin forged a quitclaim deed 3 months ago. He transferred the title to a shell company. He stole the apartment, I asked, my grip tightening on the phone. It is worse than theft, Garrison. He did not just steal it. He leveraged it. He took out a high-interest secured loan against the property value, $1.2 million. And the lender is not a bank. Who is the lender? It is a private hard money firm out of South Chicago run by the Slavic Syndicate, Mercer said. Garrison, if Justin does not pay that money back, they do not foreclose. They break legs, and since he just gambled away his crypto fund, I am guessing he has missed a payment. I stared at the screen where my son was laughing without a care in the world. He had not just betrayed me. He had signed a death warrant with the mob and used my property as the collateral. I placed the heavy receiver back in its cradle, my mind reeling from Mercer revelation. My son was not just a failure, he was a liability. He had leveraged a property he did not own to borrow money from people who broke kneecaps for sport. If I did nothing, the syndicate would eventually come for the penthouse, and then they would come for me. But saving him now would only teach him that there are no consequences for fraud. He needed to hit the wall, and he needed to hit it hard. I turned my attention back to the center monitor, where the banking interface was still glowing. The cursor hovered over the red button labeled Suspend All Cards. My finger twitched. It would be so easy. One click and their plastic would be useless. They would be stranded in Wisconsin with nothing but the cash in their pockets. But that was too merciful. If the cards were declined outright, they would just blame the bank. They would call customer service. They would make a scene about fraud protection. It would be an administrative annoyance, not a personal humiliation. I moved the cursor to the field labeled Credit Limit Management. Currently, the platinum cards issued to Cynthia and Justin had dynamic limits, essentially blank checks for whatever their hearts desired. I clicked the edit icon. I backspaced over the infinity symbol. I typed in the number 5, then 0, then zero. $500. It was a cruel number. It was enough to pay for a round of drinks, maybe a few appetizers. It was enough to give them confidence. It was enough to let them order the lobster and the champagne. But when the final bill came at the end of the night, it would be like hitting a brick wall at 60 miles per hour. I applied the changes to Cynthia card, then Justin card, then Brittany card. I hit save. The system processed for a fraction of a second and then flashed a green confirmation. Update successful. I checked the time. It was 6 p.m. I pulled up Justin's email outbox again. He had a reservation for 4 people at the Grandview, the most exclusive restaurant on the lake, at 7:30. It was a place where the tasting menu started at $300 a person. With wine and tip, the bill would easily top $2,000. And they had a combined purchasing power of $1,500, split across 3 cards. I switched the video feed back to the master bedroom. Cynthia was sitting at her vanity, applying makeup with the precision of a surgeon. She was wearing a new emerald green dress that still had the creases from the shopping bag. I checked the transaction logs. She had bought it yesterday at Neiman Marcus for $1,200. Justin walked in, fixing his tie. He looked sharp, confident. He looked like a man who had gotten away with it. Then the door to the walk-in closet opened. Gavin stepped out. He had showered and changed into a crisp white shirt and a dark blazer. He looked almost respectable until he raised his left hand to adjust his collar. I leaned forward, squinting at the high-resolution monitor. The light from the vanity lamp caught the gold on his wrist. I zoomed in. It was a Patek Philippe Calatrava, rose gold with an ivory dial. My watch. My stomach dropped. I had received that watch from the board of directors when I stepped down as CEO. It was engraved on the back. To Garrison Ford, Visionary. I kept it in a locked safe in the master bedroom closet. Or at least I thought it was locked. Cynthia must have given him the combination. She had let her lover raid my jewelry box like it was a discount bin at a yard sale. "Nice watch," Gavin said, admiring his own reflection in the full-length mirror. "Fits me better than it ever fit him." "Wear it in good health, baby," Cynthia said, standing up and smoothing her dress. "It is a shame to leave nice things gathering dust." I sat back in my chair in the cold basement. My hands were steady, but my heart was pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. They were wearing my clothes, drinking my wine, spending my money, and living in my house. "Enjoy the dinner," I whispered to the empty room. "Order the steak. Order the expensive bottle, because that watch on your wrist is the only thing of value you are going to have left by morning." The notification hit my central monitor like a winning lottery number. Transaction declined. Amount $2,850. Merchant. The Grandview. Reason credit limit exceeded. I took a sip of my whiskey and watched the data stream. 10 seconds later, a second alert appeared. Cynthia had tried her card. Transaction declined. Then Brittany tried the emergency card. Declined. The system was working perfectly. The invisible wall I had erected $500 high had just slammed into their faces at full speed. My cell phone rang on the desk. It was Justin. I let it ring 3 times, letting the panic set in before I picked up. I cleared my throat, adjusting my voice to sound frail and confused. "Hello," I answered slowly. "Dad." "What the hell is going on?" Justin screamed. The background noise was a mix of clinking silverware and hushed conversations. He was clearly stepping away from the table, but not far enough. "The cards, all of them. They are being declined. The waiter is looking at us like we are criminals. Fix it." I leaned back in my chair, smiling at the ceiling. "Justin, you know how technology is," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "Maybe it is the bad weather. Or perhaps the bank systems are down for the holiday maintenance. You know they do that sometimes." "Do not give me that senile garbage, Dad," Justin hissed. I called the automated line. It says the available credit is 0. You lowered the limits. Why did you do that? I frowned, feigning ignorance. Lowered them. Oh dear. I might have clicked the wrong button when I was trying to pay the utility bill online. My eyes are not what they used to be, son. I must have made a mistake. I will call the bank first thing in the morning when they open. Morning. Justin's voice cracked. We are at the restaurant now. We need to pay now. Fix it online. Log in and change it back. I cannot do that, I said firmly. The password is written down in my office and the door is locked. I am already in bed, Justin. It is late. You are a successful man. Surely you have your own card. Or just use some of the cash Cynthia withdrew earlier. There was a silence on the line. I knew exactly why. The cash was likely already handed over to whatever shady contractor Cynthia was paying off, or hidden away in her secret stash. They had spent the liquid assets, and now the credit well was dry. Dad, please, Justin pleaded, his voice dropping to a desperate whisper. Do not do this to me. I am tired, Justin, I said. We will sort it out tomorrow. Good night. I did not hang up. I simply set the phone down on the desk, leaving the line open. I turned up the volume on the speakerphone. I heard Justin heavy breathing, then the sound of footsteps returning to the table. Is it fixed? I heard Cynthia ask. Her voice was tight. No. Justin muttered. He says he messed up the settings. He cannot fix it until tomorrow. There was a heavy pause. The waiter cleared his throat nearby. Sir, do you have another form of payment? Justin hesitated. I could practically hear him sweating. Then he spoke the words that signaled the beginning of the end. Gavin, man, I am so sorry. The bank flagged our accounts because of the travel. It is a security freeze. Can you get this one? I will wire you the cash first thing in the morning. I leaned in closer to the speaker. I wanted to hear the hesitation. Gavin was a leech. Leeches do not like to bleed. You want me to pick up a $3,000 tab? Gavin asked. His tone was not friendly anymore. The charm was gone. It is just for tonight, babe. Cynthia chimed in, her voice dripping with desperation. We will pay you back double. You know we have it. I heard the sound of a zipper, then the slap of a heavy leather wallet hitting the table. Fine, Gavin snapped. But this better be in my account by breakfast. The call cut off as Justin finally hung up. I looked at the dark screen, imagining the scene. The mood had shifted. The power dynamic had flipped. They were no longer the wealthy benefactors treating their guest. They were the deadbeats, and the hired help just had to bail them out. Gavin was wearing my Patek Philippe watch, but he was also paying for my wife dinner. He would not be happy about that. The cracks were starting to show, and the night was still young. The drive back to the cottage must have been the longest 20 minutes of their lives. I watched the headlights sweep across the snow as the SUV jerked to a halt in the driveway. There were no smooth stops tonight. Justin killed the engine and slammed the driver door hard enough to shake the frame. I switched the audio feed to the exterior microphones just in time to hear the explosion. You are useless, Justin. Brittany screamed, her voice shrill in the frozen air. I have never been so humiliated in my entire life. The waiter looked at us like we were trash. Do you know what the woman at the next table whispered? She asked if we were dining and dashing. Keep your voice down, Justin hissed, glancing at the red Porsche parked next to them. It is just a bank glitch, Britt. Dad messed up the settings on the portal. I will fix it tomorrow. Fix it, Brittany laughed, a harsh, cruel sound. You cannot even fix a flat tire, Justin. You let your stepmother boyfriend pay for my lobster. I saw him looking at the bill. He looked like he wanted to vomit. Inside the house, the mood was even worse. I toggled the camera view to the kitchen. Gavin walked straight to the liquor cabinet. He did not bother with a glass this time. He grabbed a bottle of my 18-year-old Macallan Scotch and took a long pull straight from the neck. He slammed the bottle down on the marble island. $3,000, Cynthia, he growled. That was my rent money for next month. You said you guys were loaded. You said the old man was just a figurehead. It is just a temporary hold, baby, Cynthia pleaded, reaching out to touch his arm. He flinched away from her. I swear Garrison is just losing his grip. He probably clicked the wrong button on his computer. I will write you a check in the morning. I will write it for $4,000. Just relax. I am not relaxing, Gavin snapped. This vibe is dead. I am going to bed. And do not wake me up unless you have cash in your hand. He stormed off toward the guest wing, taking my scotch with him. Cynthia stood there alone in the kitchen, her face pale under the harsh recessed lighting. She looked old suddenly. The illusion of the carefree trophy wife was cracking under the pressure of a single declined transaction. In the living room, Justin had collapsed onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands. Brittany paced back and forth in front of the fireplace, her heels clicking angrily on the hardwood. She lit another cigarette inside my house, not even bothering to open a window. This is not working, she said, smoke curling from her lips. We cannot wait until January 2nd. Justin looked up, his eyes red and watery. What do you want me to do, Britt? The lawyer needs time to file the papers. Dr. Park needs to finalize the report. I do not care about the timeline, she spat, throwing the unsmoked half of her cigarette into the fireplace. I care about my dignity. I care about the fact that your father is sitting in Chicago playing God with our credit limits while we look like beggars. She walked over to him and grabbed him by the lapels of his jacket, yanking him forward. Her face was inches from his. You need to call Dr. Park tonight, she whispered, but the high-fidelity microphones picked up every syllable. You offer him double. You tell him it is an emergency. You tell him the old man is dangerous and we need that emergency custody order now. Justin swallowed hard. Tonight. It is Christmas Eve, Britt. Do it, she hissed, shoving him back against the cushions. You have to speed up the old man thing, Justin. I cannot live like this anymore. I am not going to be the poor relation waiting for handouts. Either you bury him or I am leaving. I switched the feed to the master bedroom balcony camera. The motion sensor had triggered, alerting me to movement in the freezing night air. Cynthia had followed Gavin outside, wrapped in a fur coat I had bought her for our 5th anniversary. Gavin was leaning against the railing, staring out at the frozen lake, his breath pluming in white clouds against the darkness. He held a cigarette with trembling fingers. He looked like a man who was calculating his exit strategy. Cynthia approached him slowly, placing a hand on his back. He stiffened, but he did not pull away this time. Baby, please listen to me, Cynthia said, her voice barely audible over the wind. The directional microphone filtered out the background noise, amplifying her betrayal. You cannot leave tomorrow. We need to present a united front. If you leave, Justin and Brittany will panic and everything will fall apart. I do not care about Justin or his nightmare wife. Gavin spat, flicking ash over the edge. I care about the fact that I just paid $3,000 for dinner because your husband shut off the tap. You said he was checked out, Cynthia. You said he was practically a vegetable. He does not seem like a vegetable to me. He seems like a guy who knows exactly how to screw us. He is not screwing us, Cynthia insisted, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. He is just having an episode. It happens with his condition. That is why we have Dr. Park. I leaned forward in my chair. There it was. The name again. What about the doctor? Gavin asked, taking a long drag. You said he was expensive. You said he needed more cash. He did, Cynthia said. And I gave it to him. That is where the $10,000 went this morning. It was the final payment. She reached into the pocket of her coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She handed it to Gavin. Read it, she said. Gavin unfolded the paper under the light of the patio heater. He squinted at the text. Certificate of Medical Incapacitation, he read aloud. Diagnosis, early onset Alzheimer, with episodes of paranoia and financial recklessness. Recommended immediate involuntary commitment for observation. My hands clenched into fists on top of my desk. Paranoia. Financial recklessness. They were using my own protective measures against me. They were painting my fiscal responsibility as a symptom of madness. He signed it this afternoon, Cynthia said, a smile creeping back onto her face. It is official, Gavin. Dr. Park put his license on the line for this. With this document and the affidavits from Justin and me stating that Garrison has become a danger to the family estate, we have everything we need. Gavin looked up from the paper, his eyes wide. So you can just lock him up. Just like that. Just like that, Cynthia confirmed, taking the paper back and tucking it safely against her chest. The courts are closed for the holiday, but my lawyer has an emergency hearing scheduled on the docket. When Gavin asked. January 2nd, Cynthia replied. 9 a.m. We walk into the courthouse with this paper, and by noon, Garrison will be in a secure facility in North Dakota. I picked a place that does not allow visitors or phone calls for the first 30 days. By the time he is allowed to speak to anyone, we will have full control of the trust. We will sell the properties, liquidate the accounts, and we will be in Tuscany before the snow melts. January 2nd. I looked at the digital clock on my wall. It was December 23rd. I had exactly 10 days before they tried to bury me. But looking at Cynthia, face glowing with the anticipation of my destruction, I realized I did not need 10 days. I only needed tonight. I saved the clip of their conversation to the secure server. This was not just evidence of a conspiracy. This was proof of medical malpractice, fraud, and intent to kidnap. They had just handed me the nail for their own coffins. January 2nd, I whispered to the screen. You are not going to make it to January 2nd, Cynthia. You are not even going to make it to sunrise. My Christmas dinner was a turkey sandwich on stale wheat bread eaten over a paper plate in a room humming with the sound of server cooling fans. Upstairs, the halls were decked with holly and lights that no one was there to see. Down here in the bunker, it was just the cold blue light of retribution. I did not feel lonely. Loneliness implies you are missing something. I was not missing anything. I was discarding the things that were rot. On the center screen, the document awaited my authorization. It was a deed of gift drafted by Mercer just hours ago. The recipient was the United States Department of the Interior, specifically the National Park Service and the Nature Conservancy. The asset listed was the Lake Geneva estate. All 8 acres, the main house, the guest house, the wine cellar, and the boathouse. I looked at the live feed from the cottage one last time. Cynthia was passed out on the sofa, still wearing her fur coat, a glass of my scotch dangling dangerously from her hand. Justin was arguing with Brittany in the kitchen, probably about money, his arms waving frantically. They looked so comfortable. They looked like they owned the place. They had no idea that in less than 2 minutes, they would be trespassing on federal land. I picked up my digital stylus. My hand did not shake. I signed my name, Garrison Ford, on the electronic pad. The signature converted to a cryptographic hash binding the document legally and irrevocably. The house was gone. It was no longer an asset in the Ford family trust. It was now a protected wetland and historic site. But I was not done. I opened the banking portal for the Ford Family Revocable Trust. This was the pot of gold they were waiting for. The $50 million they planned to spend in Tuscany while I rotted in a facility in North Dakota. I selected the entire balance. I input the routing numbers for the Wounded Warrior Project and the St. Jude Children Research Hospital. 2 charities my father had supported. 2 causes that actually deserved the money more than my ungrateful son and his scheming stepmother. I initiated the wire transfer. The system prompted for a two-factor authentication code. I typed it in. Transfer pending. Scheduled for execution at 12 a.m. Central Standard Time. I sat back and watched the digital clock on the wall. The red numbers flipped silently. 11:58 p.m. The world was quiet. Outside, snow was falling on Chicago, burying the city in white. Inside, the countdown had begun. I took a bite of my sandwich. It tasted like victory. I imagined the notifications that were about to light up their phones like Christmas trees. I imagined the confusion, then the denial, then the sheer terror. I placed my finger over the final execution key on my keyboard. The master command that would send the press releases to the Associated Press, send the title transfer to the county clerk, and trigger the wire transfers. 11:59 p.m. I took a deep breath, inhaling the ozone smell of the servers. "Merry Christmas, Justin," I whispered. "Here is the independence you never asked for." The clock ticked over. 12:00. I pressed enter. The enter key clicked. It was a soft mechanical sound, barely louder than a heartbeat, but it signaled the end of an era. On my screen, a green progress bar raced to 100%. Sent. Published. Irrevocable. I sat back in the cool darkness of my command center and took a slow sip of whiskey. It was done. The press release I had drafted with Mercer days ago was now hitting the inboxes of every major news desk in Chicago and New York. The title transfer was electronically filed with the county clerk, time-stamped at 12:01 a.m. The wire transfers were processing. I had just nuked my own financial footprint. I turned my eyes to the wall of monitors. I wanted to see the impact. I wanted to see the moment the shockwave hit ground zero. At the cottage, the living room was a scene of decadent exhaustion. Cynthia was sprawled on the leather sofa, one arm dangling off the side, her fingers loose around an empty glass of my expensive scotch. Gavin was gone, likely retreated to the guest suite to sulk about his unpaid dinner. Justin was sitting in the armchair, staring blankly into the dying embers of the fireplace, his face illuminated by the harsh blue light of his smartphone. Brittany was pacing in the background, scrolling through social media, probably looking for sympathy from strangers about her ruined vacation. Then it happened. It started as a low hum, a vibration against a glass table, then a chime, then another. Justin's phone lit up in his hand. Brittany's phone buzzed aggressively on the counter. Even Cynthia's phone, buried somewhere in the folds of her fur coat, began to ping with a relentless, insistent rhythm. It was not a text message. It was a push notification. The kind that overrides silent mode. The kind reserved for national emergencies or massive market shifts. Justin frowned. He tapped the screen, swiping down to open the alert. I watched his face closely on the high-definition feed. I watched the color drain out of it, leaving him gray and ghostly in the firelight. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He blinked once, twice, trying to process the words in front of him, as if they were written in a foreign language. Brittany picked up her phone. "What is going on?" she muttered. "My news app is blowing up. Who died?" She looked at the screen and froze. Her cigarette fell from her fingers, bouncing on the hardwood floor, sending up a tiny spark of orange that she did not even notice. Justin stood up. His legs were shaky. He looked like a man who had just been told the world was ending. He looked around the room as if the timber walls themselves were suddenly alien to him. "Mom," he croaked. "Mom, wake up." Cynthia groaned, shifting under the fur. "Go away, Justin. My head hurts." "Mom, look at your phone." Justin screamed, his voice cracking with hysteria. "Look at the news." Cynthia sat up, startled by the noise. She fumbled for her clutch, digging out her phone. The screen was a wall of notifications. Breaking news, Bloomberg, Associated Press, Chicago Tribune. "What is it?" she snapped, squinting at the bright light. Justin walked to the center of the room. He held his phone up like a priest holding a Bible, his hand trembling violently. He read the headline aloud, his voice echoing through the microphones and into my headset. Breaking news, he read. Logistics mogul Garrison Ford donates historic lake, Geneva estate, to Nature Conservancy in shocking midnight. Gift. He looked up at Cynthia, his eyes wide with terror. It says the transfer is effective immediately, Mom. It says he gave it all away. The house, the land, everything. We are not at the cottage anymore. We are trespassing. Cynthia stared at the glowing screen of Justin's phone and let out a harsh, incredulous laugh that sounded more like a bark. It echoed off the high timber ceilings of a room she no longer had the right to stand in. She tossed the phone back onto the sofa as if it were a dirty napkin. That is ridiculous, Justin, she slurred, waving her hand dismissively. It is fake news, a glitch, or maybe a hacker. Your father does not even know how to convert a Word document to a PDF. Do you really think he figured out how to transfer a deed to the federal government at midnight on a holiday? He is probably asleep in his recliner in Chicago right now, drooling on his shirt. She stood up, swaying slightly, and reached for the empty Scotch bottle. She frowned when she realized there was nothing left to pour. Calm down, she snapped at Brittany, who was hyperventilating near the fireplace. Nobody is trespassing. This is my house. My name is on the trust. But her confidence was shattered a second later. A distinct chime echoed from Justin's pocket. It was not a news alert this time. It was the standard notification for his primary email client, the one he used for business, the one he checked obsessively. Justin pulled the phone out. I watched on the monitor as his eyes scanned the screen. His jaw dropped. His hands, which had been shaking before, went completely still with shock. It is not a hacker, Mom, he whispered. His voice was devoid of hope. He held up the phone. I zoomed in with the camera. The subject line was in bold red text. Notice to vacate immediate effect. The sender was Mercer Law Firm. Justin read the email aloud, his voice trembling, to Mr. Justin Ford and occupants. Please be advised that the property located at 124 Lakeview Drive is no longer the property of the Ford Family Trust. Ownership has been transferred to the Department of the Interior. Your license to occupy the premises has been revoked. You are hereby notified to vacate the property immediately. Failure to comply will result in arrest for federal trespassing. The word arrest hung in the air like smoke. The door to the guest suite slammed open. Gavin stormed into the living room. He was carrying his duffel bag, the zipper half-open, clothes spilling out. He had heard enough. The bravado he had shown earlier when he was drinking my wine and wearing my watch was gone. In its place was the frantic energy of a rat sensing the ship going down. I am out, Gavin said, heading straight for the front door. Cynthia lunged for him, grabbing his arm. Gavin, wait. Where are you going? It is a mistake. We just need to call the lawyer. Do not touch me, Gavin shouted, yanking his arm away. Did you hear him, Cynthia? Federal trespassing. I have a record. I cannot get picked up by the feds for squatting in a park. You said you owned this place. You said the old man was a vegetable. He is, Gavin, he is! Cynthia screamed, her voice rising to a shriek. He does not sound like a vegetable, Gavin spat, grabbing his coat. He sounds like a guy who just played you. I am leaving. Do not call me. He fumbled with the lock on the front door, his hands shaking. Brittany started to cry, a low, keening wail. We have nowhere to go, Justin. The hotels are booked. It is a blizzard outside. Fix this. Justin looked from his weeping wife to his hysterical mother to the fleeing lover. He looked at the email on his phone again. The reality was finally setting in. This was not a banking error. This was an eviction. He did the only thing he could think of. He did the thing he should have done days ago. He opened his contacts and scrolled to D. On my desk in the command center, my secure cell phone began to ring. The screen lit up with a photo of Justin smiling at his college graduation, a photo from a time when I still had hope for him. I picked up the phone. I did not speak. I just listened to his panic breathing on the other end. "Dad," Justin's voice came through the speaker, tight and terrified. "Dad, pick up. Please tell me this is a joke. Dad, are you there? Dad, are you crazy?" Justin screamed, his voice cracking and distorting through the speaker of my secure phone. "What did you do? The news says you gave the house away. Tell me it is a hack. Tell me you did not just burn our inheritance to the ground because your feelings were hurt." I leaned back in my leather chair, taking a slow, deliberate sip of whiskey. The contrast between his panic and my absolute calm was the best Christmas gift I had ever received. I watched him on the monitor. He was pacing in circles, his face a mask of sweat and terror. "Hello, Justin," I said, my voice steady and low. "I hope you are having a relaxing evening. You said you wanted a stress-free holiday." "Stress-free!" Justin shrieked so loud the audio levels peaked on my screen. "Mercer just sent me an eviction notice, Dad. The internet says the Department of the Interior owns the cottage now. Fix this. Call them back. Tell them you are senile. Tell them you made a mistake." "I did not make a mistake, Justin," I replied. "I made a correction. You told me I was difficult. You said I hovered too much. You said I worried too much about the cost of maintaining the estate. So I did some soul-searching. I realized you were right. Holding on to all that property was a burden. So I let it go." "You let it go," Justin stammered. "You gave away an $8 million estate to the park rangers." "It is a tax write-off, son," I said. "You know how much I love efficiency. And besides, I thought you would be happy. You do not have to worry about my rules anymore, because it is not my house." "You are insane," Justin yelled. "Mom is hysterical. Brittany is crying. We are stranded in a blizzard. We have nowhere to go. You have to undo it. Call Mercer right now. I cannot undo a deed of gift, Justin. It is irrevocable. That means it cannot be taken back. Just like the years I wasted paying off your failed startups. Just like the trust you broke when you brought your stepmother lover into my home to drink my wine." He went silent on the other end. He froze on the camera feed. He looked at the ceiling as if he could see me watching him. He knew. He finally realized I had been watching the whole time. "Dad," he whispered. "And Justin," I added, my voice dropping to a whisper that was colder than the ice on the lake. "Since the title transfer was time-stamped at 12:01 a.m., and it is now 12:12 a.m., you are technically unauthorized occupants on federal government property. That is criminal trespassing. If I were you, I would stop arguing and start running. Dad, wait, do not hang up, please. Goodbye, Justin. Merry Christmas." I pressed the red button on the console, severing the connection. The line went dead. I watched Justin stare at his phone in disbelief. He looked like a man who had just stepped off a cliff and was waiting to hit the bottom. The silence in my basement command center was absolute, but only for a second. On the center monitor, a new sound cut through the winter night. It was a sound I had arranged hours ago when I tipped off the local precinct about intruders at the vacant estate. The high-pitched wail of sirens. I watched the driveway camera. Blue and red lights washed over the pristine snow, reflecting off the windows of the black SUV and the red Porsche. The sheriff had arrived, and he was not coming for a noise complaint. He was coming to clear the premises. I watched the heavy oak front door shudder under the force of a fist. It was not a polite, neighborly knock. It was the heavy, authoritative pounding of the law. Sheriff Jim Miller stood on the porch, flanked by two deputies, his breath clouding in the strobe light of the cruisers. Jim and I had fished the lake together for 20 years. He was a good man, by-the-book lawman, and I had called him personally 10 minutes ago to report an active intrusion at the newly designated Federal Reserve. Justin opened the door. He looked small and pathetic against the backdrop of the swirling snow and flashing red and blue lights. Sheriff Justin stammered, wiping sweat from his forehead. Thank God you are here. My father is having some kind of episode. He thinks he gave the house away. We need you to file a report." Miller did not smile. He did not offer a holiday greeting. He adjusted the brim of his hat and stepped over the threshold, the snow from his boots melting instantly onto the expensive Persian rug Cynthia loved so much. "I need to see identification for everyone on the premises," Miller said, his voice booming through the microphones. "ID." Justin laughed nervously, a high-pitched sound that bordered on hysteria. "Sheriff, you know me. It is Justin, Garrison's son. We are just here for Christmas." "I know who you are, son," Miller said, looking past him into the living room, where Cynthia was frantically trying to shove a bottle of vodka into her purse. "But I also know who owns this property. And as of 12:01 this morning, it is not Garrison Ford." Cynthia stormed over, her fur coat flapping like the wings of an angry bat. "This is ridiculous, Jim. Garrison is senile. He messed up some paperwork online. We are sorting it out with the lawyers in the morning. Now please get your deputies out of my house." Miller looked at her with eyes like flint. He pulled a ruggedized tablet from his belt, tapped the screen, and turned it around so they could see the digital deed. The official seal of the Department of the Interior glowed on the display. "Ma'am, according to the county clerk and the Federal Registry, this property is now part of the Geneva Lake Conservancy District. It is government land, and I have strict orders to remove any unauthorized persons. We are not unauthorized." Cynthia shrieked, pointing a manicured finger at his chest. "I am his wife. This is marital property." "It does not matter," Miller said, putting the tablet away. "The transfer is valid. The owner did not issue any permits for a holiday party. You are trespassing on protected land." Brittany started wailing again from the sofa. "But it is a blizzard outside. We cannot leave. We have nowhere to go." Miller checked his watch. "I knew he was enjoying this. He never liked Cynthia. She once called his deputy a rent-a-cop during a speeding stop, and Jim has a long memory." "I do not see your names on the access roster," Miller said calmly. "So here is how this is going to work. You have 15 minutes to gather your personal effects and vacate the premises." 15 minutes? Justin gasped. "We have luggage. We have food. We have not even packed." 14 minutes now," Miller said, resting his hand on his belt. "And I suggest you hurry. The tow trucks for the unauthorized vehicles are about 5 minutes out. If you are still inside this house at 12:45, you will be arrested for criminal trespass." Tow trucks. That was the cherry on top. I sat in my basement and watched the color drain from Justin's face. He realized the Porsche and the SUV were parked illegally on federal land. He looked at his mother, then at his wife, then at the open door where the cold wind was blowing in. "Move," Miller barked. Panic erupted. They scrambled like roaches when the lights turn on. Justin ran for the stairs. Cynthia dropped her purse, spilling makeup across the floor, and fell to her knees to gather it. It was chaos. Beautiful, organized chaos. And I had a front row seat. I watched the disintegration of my family in real time on monitor 2. It was not a slow fade. It was a violent fracture. Gavin was the first to break ranks. He did not bother packing the rest of his things. He just grabbed his duffel bag and sprinted for the red Porsche, his boots slipping on the ice. He threw the bag into the passenger seat and jumped in, cranking the engine. The headlights cut through the swirling snow, blinding Cynthia as she ran after him. She clutched her purse to her chest like a lifeline, stumbling in her high-heeled boots. She reached for the passenger door handle, but it was locked. She banged on the glass with her fist. "Unlock the door, Gavin," she screamed, her voice shrill with panic. "We are leaving together. Let me in." Gavin rolled the window down just an inch. The heat from inside the car poured out into the freezing night. "You are crazy, Cynthia," he shouted over the wind. "Federal trespassing. Do you know what that means? I am on probation in Illinois. I cannot be here when the tow trucks show up. I cannot be associated with this. But I am your girlfriend, she wailed, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. You said you loved me. You said we were partners. Gavin laughed, a cold sound that the high-fidelity microphone picked up clearly. I loved the lifestyle, Cynthia. I loved the wine and the free house and the credit cards. Now you are just a homeless woman with a potential felony charge. Good luck with the old man. He revved the engine. The tires spun on the slick driveway, throwing a spray of dirty slush onto her expensive fur coat. The Porsche fishtailed out of the driveway and roared down the access road, disappearing into the whiteout. Cynthia stood there, stunned, abandoned in the driveway she thought she owned, staring at the red taillights fading into the storm. But the drama was not over. Near the black SUV, Justin was struggling to jam a suitcase into the trunk. It was too full, and the latch would not close. Brittany stood over him, her arms crossed, her face twisted in a snarl. You promised me, she hissed. You said you handled him. You said the old man was powerless. You said we were set for life, Justin. Justin looked up, pathetic snow matting his hair to his forehead. I thought I did, Britt. I do not know how he did this. He must have had help. He must have hired someone. Brittany did not wait for an excuse. She swung her hand. The sound of the slap cracked through the exterior microphones, sharp as a pistol shot. Justin stumbled back, holding his cheek, staring at his wife in shock. You are pathetic, she spit at him. You are a weak, broke little man. I should have listened to my mother. I should have married the banker. Sheriff Miller stepped off the porch, his flashlight cutting through the gloom. Time is up, folks, he barked. Off the property, now, or you leave in handcuffs. They did not walk out with dignity. They were herded. The deputies marched them down the long driveway. Cynthia was still sobbing, calling Gavin's name into the wind. Justin was dragging the broken suitcase, leaving a trail of his clothes in the snow. Brittany marched ahead, refusing to look at either of them. They reached the main gate. The heavy iron gates I had installed to keep the world out now swung shut with a final metallic clang, locking them out. They stood there on the side of the public road, huddled together against the biting wind. The snow fell harder, erasing their footprints from my land. They were cold. They were alone. And for the first time in their lives, they were completely and utterly homeless. The interior of the black SUV was a claustrophobic cage of misery speeding down Interstate 94. I sat in my command center watching the GPS crawl south through the blizzard. I had tapped into the vehicle telematics system hours ago, so I could hear every breath, every sob, and every accusation. They were 300 miles from Chicago, with the heater blasting against the sub-zero night, but the atmosphere inside that car was colder than the grave. Cynthia was in the back seat, huddled under her ruined fur coat, shivering violently. She was tapping furiously on her phone, the screen glow illuminating her mascara-stained face. I just need a room, she muttered, her teeth chattering. Any room. There is a Motel 6 at the next exit. It is disgusting, but it has a bed. I am booking it. I watched the transaction log on my center monitor. Attempted charge. Motel 6. Status declined. Reason account frozen. It is not working, she shrieked, throwing the phone onto the empty seat beside her. He froze it. He froze everything. My card is dead. Justin, use yours. Book it now. I cannot, Mom, Justin whispered from the driver's seat. His eyes were glued to the road, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. I tried at the gas station 5 miles back. My Amex is locked. Dad must have called the fraud department. Brittany sat in the passenger seat, staring out at the swirling white void. She had not spoken since they left the gates. She turned slowly to look at the dashboard. Justin, she said, her voice dangerously calm. The fuel light is on. I know, Justin snapped. I am trying to conserve gas. You have 19 miles of range, Brittany read from the digital display. The next service plaza is 30 miles away. We are going to run out of gas in a blizzard. We will make it. Justin lied. We just need to draft behind a truck. And when we get there, Brittany asked, turning in her seat to face him fully. How are you going to pay for the gas, Justin? Your dad cut us off. Your mom is broke. My cards are maxed out because I paid for the caterer you forgot to deposit. So you pay. Use your trading account. Justin went silent. The only sound was the rhythmic thumping of the wiper blades fighting the heavy snow. Justin Brittany repeated sharper this time. Transfer the money from your crypto wallet. You said you had $50,000 in liquidity. Transfer it to your debit card so we do not freeze to death on the side of the highway. I cannot, Justin whispered. It was so quiet the microphone barely picked it up. What did you say? Cynthia asked from the back, leaning forward. I cannot, Justin yelled, slamming his hand against the steering wheel. It is gone. Okay. It is all gone. The market tanked last week. I tried to leverage the dip to make it back, but I got liquidated. I lost the principal. I lost the savings. I have negative $12 in that account. I am broke, Brittany. I am completely broke. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. The car engine hummed a death rattle as the fuel gauge dipped below the red line. Brittany stared at him. She did not scream. She did not cry. She looked at him with the kind of absolute clarity that only comes when the bottom finally drops out. She reached down to her left hand. She pulled off the 3-carat diamond engagement ring I had paid for 5 years ago. She dropped it into the cup holder with a dull plastic clatter. I am done, she said, staring straight ahead into the storm. I want a divorce. What? Justin gasped, taking his eyes off the road. Brittany, you cannot be serious. We are in a blizzard. I do not care, she said. As soon as this car stops, I am walking. I would rather freeze in a snowbank than spend another second married to a loser who lied to me for 5 years. The SUV sputtered. The engine missed a beat. The fuel gauge hit 0. They were coasting now, rolling on momentum and fumes into the darkness. I watched the GPS speed drop. 60, 40, 20. They were slowing down in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by ice and the consequences of their own greed. And I poured myself another drink. Dawn broke over Chicago gray and unforgiving. I stood by the bay window in the library, sipping a fresh espresso, watching the street. The city was quiet, waking up to a white Christmas, but inside my house the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. I had been up all night coordinating the final phase of the lockout. At 6:15 in the morning, the black SUV finally rolled onto the street. It looked like a war relic covered in road salt and grime, moving sluggishly, as if the engine was about to seize. They parked on the curb because I had disabled the remote access to the heated garage hours ago. I watched them stumble out of the car. They looked like the survivors of a shipwreck. Cynthia was still wearing the ruined fur coat, but now it was stained with mud and slush. Her hair was a matted mess. Justin walked with a limp, likely from sitting in a freezing car for 6 hours. Brittany trailed behind them, her arms wrapped around herself, shivering violently in a thin coat. She was not wearing her wedding ring. I noticed that immediately. They did not look sad. They looked furious. They marched up the heated driveway, their breath puffing in angry clouds. They were coming to take back what they thought was theirs. They were coming to scream at the difficult old man until he fixed everything. Justin reached the front door first. He punched the code into the smart lock keypad. 1985, his birth year. The keypad flashed a harsh red LED. Access denied. He frowned and punched it again, harder this time. 1985. Access denied. I heard him curse through the doorbell camera. It is frozen, he shouted, kicking the solid oak door. The battery must be dead. Mom, use your key. Cynthia stepped forward, digging into her purse with frantic movements. She pulled out her brass key, the one she had carried for 12 years. She shoved it into the lock cylinder. It went in halfway and stopped. "It is stuck," she hissed, jiggling it violently. She pushed harder, twisting with desperation. Snap! The head of the key broke off in her hand, leaving the jagged metal blade embedded in the lock. "He changed the cores," she screamed, throwing the broken piece of brass onto the doormat. "He changed the locks, Justin. On Christmas Eve." She started pounding on the wood with her fists. "Garrison," she shrieked. "Open this door right now. I live here. This is my house. Open it, or I am calling the police." I let them scream for a full minute. I let the neighbors wake up. I let them exhaust their last reserves of energy on my doorstep. Then I adjusted my tie, smoothed my suit jacket, and walked to the foyer. I unlocked the deadbolt from the inside. The sound of the heavy tumblers sliding back was loud enough to silence them instantly. The door swung open. Cynthia lunged forward, her face twisted in a mask of pure hate. "You son of a—" She started raising her hand to strike me. She never made contact. Two massive figures stepped out from the alcoves on either side of the entrance. They were not police. They were private security contractors Mercer had sent over. Ex-military men with necks thick as tree trunks and faces carved from granite. They moved with terrifying speed, forming a human wall between me and my family. One of them caught Cynthia's wrist in midair. He did not hurt her, but he stopped her cold. "Step back, ma'am," the guard said, his voice low and dangerous. Justin tried to push past him. "Get out of my way," he yelled. "I need to talk to my father." The second guard placed a hand on Justin's chest and shoved him backward. Justin stumbled, tripping over his own feet and landing hard on the snowy driveway. "You do not have a father right now, son," I said, stepping into the doorway, my polished shoes shining against the dirty mat. "You have a landlord, and you are late with the rent." "Let them in," I said to the head of security. The guards stepped aside, creating a narrow path through the foyer. My family shuffled into the formal living room, bringing the smell of stale car air and wet wool with them. They stopped just inside the archway, huddled together like prisoners facing a firing squad. They looked at the room as if they had never seen it before. I had staged the scene perfectly. I was sitting in my favorite wingback chair wearing a charcoal three-piece suit I had commissioned in London. I was shaved, showered, and rested. To my right sat Mercer, my lawyer, looking like a vulture in a silk tie. He did not look up when they entered. He was too busy organizing the 4 distinct stacks of manila folders arranged with military precision on the coffee table. "Sit down," I said, gesturing to the sofa opposite us. I did not offer them coffee. I did not offer them water. Cynthia stepped forward, her eyes darting around the room looking for something to throw, or perhaps looking for a way to regain control. She did not sit. She stood her ground, clutching her purse with white-knuckled desperation. "You have lost your mind, Garrison," she spat, her voice raspy from hours of screaming in the car. "You locked us out of our own home. You gave away the cottage. You stranded us in a blizzard. Do you have any idea how illegal this is? I am going to sue you for everything you have left." I picked up the first folder from the stack. It was thick, heavy with the weight of her betrayal. "You cannot sue me, Cynthia, because you do not have standing," I said calmly. "And you do not have standing because as of 9 a.m. this morning, I filed for an annulment based on fraud." "Annulment?" She laughed, a shrill, hysterical sound. "We have been married for 12 years, you old fool. You cannot annul a 12-year marriage." "You can when the marriage was predicated on a false identity," I replied. "Or did you think I would never find out about your previous marriage in Las Vegas? The one you never legally dissolved before you married me?" Her face went slack. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving her looking like a wax figure melting in the heat. Justin stepped forward, trying to shield her. "Dad, stop it. You are confusing her. You are confusing everyone. This is exactly what we were talking about. You are having an episode." I looked at my son. He was shivering, but I knew it was not from the cold. It was from the withdrawal. The adrenaline of the gamble was gone, and now he was just facing the debt. "Sit down, Justin," I warned him, "unless you want the guards to put you down." Cynthia's eyes suddenly snapped to the folder in my hand. Then they darted to Mercer. Then back to me. She saw the calm calculation in my eyes, and it terrified her more than any anger could. She realized in that moment that I was not confused. I was not senile. I was 5 steps ahead. But she had one card left to play. Or so she thought. She reached into her purse and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. It was the certificate, the one she had bought for $10,000. "You are sick!" she screamed, waving the paper in the air like a weapon. Dr. Park signed it. "He certified you. You are mentally incompetent, Garrison. Nothing you do counts. Your signature is invalid. The deed transfer is void. You are a danger to yourself." She lunged at me. It was a desperate, feral move. She wanted to claw the smile off my face. She wanted to physically force me to submit to her narrative. She covered 3 feet before the security guard intercepted her. He caught her by the waist and swung her back onto the sofa with practiced ease. She landed hard, bouncing against the cushions next to a terrified Brittany. Cynthia scrambled to get up, her hair wild, her eyes wide with madness. "He is crazy," she howled, pointing a trembling finger at me. "Read the paper. The doctor said he is crazy. Lock him up. Someone lock him up." I looked at the crumpled piece of paper Cynthia was clutching like a holy relic. It was the only weapon she had left, the only thing standing between her and total ruin. She truly believed that a signature from a crooked doctor could override the reality of my sanity. She thought the law was a magic spell, where the right paperwork made the truth disappear. Mercer did not even blink. He reached forward and adjusted his silk tie with a slow, deliberate motion that drew every eye in the room. Then he opened a slim laptop on the coffee table. He turned the screen so they could not see it, but he turned the volume up to maximum. "I think we should listen to the doctor professional opinion," Mercer said, his voice dry as dust. He pressed a single key. The sound that filled the room was crystal clear. It was digital high-fidelity audio captured by the security microphones in the library, the ones Cynthia thought were broken. I heard the sound of a zipper, then the thud of a heavy envelope hitting a desk. "There is $10,000 in cash." It was Cynthia's voice. There was no mistaking the sharp, demanding tone. "And you understand the terms, Mrs. Ford?" That was Dr. Park. His voice was oily, hesitant. "I understand that my husband is a difficult man," Cynthia's voice continued. "I understand that he is becoming a burden. I need a diagnosis that gives me immediate power of attorney. I do not want a treatment plan, doctor. I want a facility. I want him gone by January 2nd. There was a pause on the recording, then the sound of paper shuffling. "Alzheimer is a difficult diagnosis to fake," Dr. Park said. "But for $10,000, I suppose I can see the symptoms you are describing. Paranoia, aggression. It will be enough for an emergency order." Mercer pressed the space bar. The recording stopped with a sharp digital click that echoed like a gunshot in the silent room. Cynthia lowered the paper slowly. Her hand was trembling so violently that the certificate rattled. She looked at the laptop, then at Mercer, then at me. Her face had gone the color of old ash. "That is illegal," she whispered. "You cannot record me in my own home. That is inadmissible." "Actually," Mercer said, leaning back and crossing his legs, "it is perfectly admissible when it is evidence of a felony in progress. And since the recording was made on a server owned by Mr. Ford, in a house owned by Mr. Ford during the commission of a crime against Mr. Ford, the district attorney was very interested in hearing it." "District Attorney," Cynthia choked out. Mercer picked up the second folder from his stack. He opened it, revealing a fax confirmation sheet. I sent a copy of this audio file along with the bank records of your withdrawal and the doctor deposit to the Illinois State Medical Board at 8 a.m. this morning. Dr. Park license has already been suspended pending an emergency investigation. I imagine he is currently negotiating a plea deal to save his own skin. And do you know who the first person he will roll on is? He looked at Cynthia over the rim of his glasses. He will roll on the person who bribed him, Mrs. Ford. Cynthia dropped the certificate. It fluttered to the floor, landing on the expensive rug she had picked out. She looked at me, and for the first time in 12 years, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. Not the fear of being broke, the fear of being caged. You sent it to the police, she gasped. I did. Mercer confirmed, closing the file. Conspiracy to commit medical fraud, elder abuse, attempted kidnapping. You are not just facing a lawsuit, Cynthia. You are facing 5 to 10 years in a federal penitentiary. The room spun around her. I watched her knees give out. She collapsed back onto the sofa, not with the grace of a socialite, but with the heavy, dead weight of a woman whose life had just ended. She brought her hands up to her mouth, stifling a sob that was building in her chest. She realized then that she was not fighting for the house anymore. She was fighting for her freedom, and she had already lost. Cynthia was reduced to a sobbing wreck on the sofa, but the room was still heavy with unresolved tension. I turned my eyes to Justin. He was pressing himself into the corner of the couch, trying to put as much distance between himself and his mother as possible. He looked at her with a mixture of pity and disgust, as if her only crime was getting caught. He thought that because she was the mastermind, he was just a victim. He thought he could still play the innocent son who was manipulated by a wicked stepmother. I reached for the third folder on the table. It was the thickest one, bulging with papers that detailed a legacy of failure. And you, I said, my voice soft, but cutting through his mother's whimpers. You sat at my table and called me difficult. You told your wife I was tight with money because I asked about a heating bill. You let everyone believe I was a miser, hoarding his gold while you struggled to make ends meet. I stood up. The movement made the security guards tense, but I only took one step toward him. I threw the folder. It did not slide across the table. It hit Justin square in the chest and exploded. Hundreds of pages fluttered to the floor like dead leaves. Red ink, bank statements, margin call notifications, betting slips from offshore sports books. Look at it, Justin, I commanded. Look at your inheritance. Justin looked down. He saw the logos of the crypto exchanges where he had burned his capital. He saw the transaction logs from the online casinos where he spent his nights while Brittany slept. You think I did not know, I asked. You think because I do not have a Twitter account, I do not know what a blockchain is. I watched you. I watched you pour money into holes that have no bottom. I pointed a finger at the mess on the floor. $1.2 million. Justin looked up, his face pale. What? That is how much I have paid in the last 5 years to cover your mistakes, I said, letting the number hang in the air. When your first startup failed, who paid the vendors so you would not get sued? When you crashed that Audi into the parked car, who paid the settlement to keep it out of the papers? When you maxed out your credit cards in Vegas, who paid the balance so your credit score did not tank? It was me, Justin. It was always me. I took a step closer, towering over him as he sat on the low sofa. I am not a difficult man. I am not a mean old miser. I was the only thing standing between you and the gutter. I was a machine that spit out money every time you made a mistake. But you know what happens to machines when you kick them too many times, Justin. He shook his head, tears welling in his eyes. They break, I whispered. I am a broken ATM, Justin. The screen is dark. The cash slot is welded shut. And you are out of pins. The reality hit him like a physical blow. He realized that the safety net he had bounced on his entire life was gone. He realized that the debts he had hidden, the loan sharks he had borrowed from the lifestyle he had faked, it was all crashing down on him right now. He slid off the sofa. He did not stand up. He sank down. He fell to his knees on the expensive rug amidst the scattered evidence of his own incompetence. He reached out to grab the hem of my pants, his hands shaking violently. "Dad, please," he sobbed, his voice breaking into a high-pitched wail. "You cannot do this. I have debts, Dad. Real debts. Bad people. They will hurt me. Please, just one more time. I will change. I swear to God, I will change." I looked down at my son weeping at my feet. A grown man of 38 years reduced to a terrified child not because he lost his father, but because he lost his funding. I felt nothing. No pity. No anger. Just the cold, hollow realization that I should have let him fall a long time ago. I looked away from my weeping son and fixed my gaze on his wife. Brittany was standing near the fireplace, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. She was looking down at Justin with a mixture of revulsion and relief. She thought that because Justin was the gambler and Cynthia was the mastermind, she could simply walk away as the innocent bystander. She thought she could play the victim card one last time and salvage her reputation. "I did not know, Garrison," she said, her voice shaking slightly as she met my eyes. "I had no idea he was stealing from you. I had no idea about the debts. I am a victim here too. I just want to go home." I signaled to Mercer. He tapped a key on his laptop, and the 85-inch television mounted above the fireplace flickered to life. It was connected wirelessly to the evidence file. "You are not a victim, Brittany," I said, my voice devoid of warmth. "You are an accomplice. You were not just waiting for me to die. You were checking your watch." The screen filled with screenshots of a text message conversation. It was a group chat between Brittany and her best friend from college. The timestamps were from 3 days ago, just before they left for the cottage. I watched Brittany's face turn the color of chalk as she read her own words, projected in high definition. Mercer read the highlighted text aloud, his voice flat and clinical. Brittany writes, quote, "I cannot wait for this Christmas to be over. The old dinosaur is being so difficult. Hopefully the stress gives him a stroke so we can finally cash out the trust. I have my eye on a villa in Cabo," unquote. Brittany mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "That was a joke," she stammered, backing away. "It was just dark humor, Garrison. I was venting." "Venting," I repeated. "You wished for my death so you could buy a vacation home. You pushed Justin to demand more money. You encouraged him to cut me out. You are the poison in his ear, Brittany." She looked around the room, realizing there was no sympathy to be found. "Fine," she snapped, straightening her spine. "You made your point. You are a vindictive old man. I am leaving. I am going back to the penthouse. I will file for divorce in the morning, and I will take half of whatever Justin has left." I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "You really do not listen, do you, Brittany?" I asked. "I told you Justin has nothing left, and that includes the penthouse." She froze. "What do you mean? The penthouse is in your name. We just live there." I looked at Justin, who was still sobbing on the rug. He curled into a ball, trying to hide from the inevitable. "Tell her, Justin," I said. "Tell her what you did 3 months ago." Justin did not speak. He just shook his head, burying his face in his hands. Mercer pulled the final document from his stack. Justin forged a quitclaim deed transferring the title to a shell company, Mercer explained. Then he used that title as collateral for a hard money loan. $1.2 million. He did not pay it back. The lenders initiated foreclosure proceedings yesterday. The locks on the penthouse were changed this morning. Brittany stared at Mercer, then at me. Then slowly, she turned her eyes down to the man curled up at her feet. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. She was not just broke. She was homeless. And the man she had married for his potential was now a liability with a target on his back. She let out a scream of pure, unadulterated rage. It was not a cry of sadness. It was the sound of a parasite realizing the host was dead. "You lying piece of trash!" she shrieked. She reached for her left hand. She ripped the diamond engagement ring off her finger. It was the last thing of value she possessed, and she did not even hesitate. She threw it. The heavy diamond ring hit Justin square in the forehead, cutting the skin. He yelped and covered his face, but she was already moving. She stepped over him as if he were a pile of dirty laundry. She did not look back at me. She did not look back at Cynthia. She marched to the front door and slammed it behind her, leaving nothing but silence and the smell of expensive perfume in her wake. I stood up from the wingback chair. The movement was slow and deliberate, the sound of the leather creaking echoing in the silent room like a gavel striking a sounding block. I buttoned my suit jacket, one button at a time, looking down at the wreckage of my family. Justin was still on the floor, dabbing at the cut on his forehead with his sleeve. Cynthia was staring at the wall, her eyes glazed over, seemingly unable to process the magnitude of her collapse. They were waiting for the punchline. They were waiting for me to say that this was all a cruel lesson and that they could go upstairs to their warm beds and sleep it off. I checked my watch. "You have exactly 5 minutes to vacate this property," I said. Cynthia blinked, focusing on me slowly. "What are you talking about, Garrison? You can't kick us out of the main house. We have rights. This is my marital home." "Not anymore," I replied. Mercer stepped forward, handing me a document stamped with the seal of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. "Because of the evidence regarding the fraud, the elder abuse, and the money laundering scheme you ran through the household accounts, this property has been designated as a crime scene," I explained. My voice was devoid of emotion. "It is being seized for forensic accounting. The locks are already changed and the alarms are being reset. If you are found on the premises after I leave, you will be arrested for tampering with evidence." Justin scrambled to his feet. He looked pathetic, blood smearing his forehead, his designer clothes rumpled and stained. "Dad, please," he begged. "You can't do this. I have nowhere to go." Brittany took the car keys. "I don't have a wallet. I don't have a phone. I don't even have a coat." I looked at him. For a split second, I felt that old instinct, the one that had made me write checks for 30 years. The instinct to fix it, to smooth it over, to protect him from the world. But then I remembered the text messages. I remembered him laughing while his stepmother's lover drank my wine. I remembered that he was 38 years old, not 8. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. I pulled out a standard white envelope. It was thin. Justin saw it. His eyes lit up. A desperate, hungry hope washed over his face. He thought it was a check. He thought it was cash. He thought that in the end, the old man was still the same soft touch he had always been. "I have one last thing for you, Justin," I said, holding it out. He snatched it from my hand. His fingers tore at the paper. He ripped it open, shaking, and pulled out the single folded sheet inside. He unfolded it. He stared at it. His brow furrowed in confusion. He turned the paper over, looking for the check that wasn't there. "What is this?" he whispered. "Read it," I said. He read the first line aloud, his voice trembling. "Gamblers Anonymous. Chicago chapter. Meeting times and locations." "Keep reading," I commanded. He looked down the list. Manpower Staffing Agency, Day Labor Solutions, Heavy Lifting Movers, Warehouse Associate Positions available immediately. "It is not money, Justin," I said, stepping closer to him until I was looking him dead in the eye. "It is an opportunity. You have spent your entire life playing with my money. Now you are going to learn what it feels like to earn your own." He looked up at me, betrayal etched into every line of his face. You are sending me to a temp agency. You are telling me to move boxes. I am telling you to grow up, I said. That list is the most valuable thing I have ever given you. It is the only way you are going to survive the people you borrowed money from. Work hard. Keep your head down. And maybe in 10 years you will understand why I did this. I turned to the security guards. Escort them out, I said. Justin crumpled the paper in his fist, but he didn't throw it away. Deep down, he knew it was the only lifeline he had left. The guards stepped forward, their shadows falling over my wife and son. It was time to take out the trash. The heavy oak door opened one last time, revealing the gray morning light of Christmas Day. It should have been a peaceful scene. Snow was falling gently on the driveway, covering the tire tracks of the tow trucks that had already hauled away their luxury SUVs. But for my wife Cynthia, it was not a winter wonderland. It was the end of the road. 2 private security guards marched her down the front steps like a prisoner of war. She held her head high, clutching her purse, trying to salvage some scrap of her socialite persona. She thought the worst was over. She thought she was just being evicted. She thought she could call a cab, go to a hotel, and start planning her divorce settlement. She had no idea that Mercer had made one final phone call while we were sitting in the living room listening to the audio tapes. A plainclothes detective stepped out from behind an unmarked sedan parked at the bottom of the driveway. He did not look like Sheriff Miller. He did not look like a friend. He looked like the kind of man who chases white-collar criminals for a living. He blocked her path at the bottom of the stairs. Cynthia stopped. She looked annoyed. "Excuse me," she said, trying to step around him. "I am leaving. Get out of my way." The detective pulled a pair of steel handcuffs from his belt. The metallic click as he opened them was louder than the wind in the trees. "Cynthia Ford," he said, his voice cutting through the crisp air. "You are under arrest." She froze. For what she laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound that grated on my ears, for being difficult, for arguing with my husband. "No, ma'am," the detective said, snapping the first cuff onto her wrist. "For identity theft, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit medical forgery. We spoke to Dr. Park this morning. He was very eager to share his text messages with us in exchange for leniency." The reality hit her harder than the cold wind. She tried to pull away, but the detective was faster. He spun her around and secured her other hand behind her back. The fur coat I had bought her, the symbol of her status, was now just padding against the cold metal of the law. "You cannot do this," she screamed, thrashing against his grip. "I am a wealthy woman. I have rights. My husband will sue you. Garrison, tell them. Tell them it is a mistake." She looked back at the house. I stood in the open doorway, warming my hands in my pockets. I did not say a word. I did not look away. I watched as the detective read her Miranda rights, reciting the words that marked the official end of her life as she knew it. Justin stood a few feet away, watching his mother being arrested. He did not move to help her. He looked terrified, realizing that if they had a warrant for her, they probably had questions for him too. He took a step back, fading into the bushes, trying to make himself invisible. The detective guided Cynthia toward the back seat of the squad car. She lost her footing on the ice and stumbled, but he held her up, not with kindness, but with the firm grip of the state. She ducked her head, not to avoid the roof, but to hide her face from the neighbors who were starting to peek out of their windows. But right before the door slammed shut, she looked up. She locked eyes with me across the expanse of the snowy lawn. Her face was a mask of pure terror. "Garrison," she howled, her voice raw and desperate, echoing off the stone facade of the house she used to rule. "Garrison, help me. Please. Garrison." The door slammed shut, cutting off her scream. I watched through the tinted glass as she slumped against the seat, weeping. The detective got in the front, and the car pulled away, leaving nothing but silence and tire tracks in the snow. I took a deep breath of the cold air. It tasted clean. The silence that followed the police siren was louder than the scream. Justin stood on the sidewalk alone in the falling snow, watching the taillights of the squad car disappear around the corner. He was the last man standing on a battlefield where he had been slaughtered. He looked to his left where he had parked his black SUV the night before. It was gone. All that remained was a rectangle of dry pavement where the chassis had blocked the snowfall and a few shards of ice left by the tow truck tires. The private security team had been efficient. They had cleared the driveway of unauthorized vehicles while the family was being destroyed inside. Justin reached into his pocket, out of habit, looking for his keys. His hand grasped nothing but lint. He reached for his wallet and remembered he had left it on the entry table when the guards dragged him out. He tapped his pockets for his phone, but the battery had died an hour ago during the drive from Wisconsin. He was 38 years old. He had a degree from a university he barely attended. He had a wardrobe worth $20,000, and he was standing on a public street in Chicago with absolutely nothing to his name except the clothes on his back and a crumpled piece of paper in his fist. He shivered. The wind off Lake Michigan was brutal, cutting right through his designer blazer. It was the kind of cold that hurts, the kind of cold that does not care who your father is. He looked down at the paper Garrison had given him. He smoothed it out with trembling fingers. The ink was smudged with his own blood from the cut on his forehead, where Brittany's ring had hit him. Manpower staffing, day labor, substance abuse counseling. He wanted to rip it up. He wanted to throw it in the gutter and scream. But he didn't. His fingers curled around it tightly. It was the only asset he had left. It was the only thing in the world that offered him a direction, even if that direction was down. He turned back to the house one last time. The stone mansion loomed over him, massive and impregnable. It looked like a fortress he had been exiled from. He scanned the facade looking for a sign of life. Maybe his father was bluffing. Maybe the door would open and Garrison would call him back inside and tell him the lesson was learned. Then he saw him. On the second floor in the window of the library, Garrison was standing there. He was holding a cup of coffee. He was looking down at the street. He was looking right at Justin. Justin raised a hand. It was a weak, pathetic gesture. A wave, a plea, a beg for mercy. Garrison did not wave back. He did not smile. He did not frown. He looked at his son with the same detached interest one might have for a stranger walking past on the sidewalk. He took a sip of his coffee and then slowly, deliberately reached out and pulled the heavy velvet drapes shut. The window went dark. The connection was severed. Justin stood there for a long moment, staring at the closed curtains. He realized then that no one was coming to save him. The safety net was gone. The bank of Dad was closed. He was just a guy on the street in the snow. He turned his collar up against the wind. He looked down the long gray avenue stretching out toward the city center. It was a long walk to the nearest homeless shelter. He put one foot in front of the other and started walking. He did not look back. He just walked, lurching slightly into the biting wind, a small dark figure disappearing into the whiteout of Christmas morning. The heavy brass latch of the front door clicked shut, sealing the cold Christmas air outside. The silence that followed was instant and absolute. It was not the silence of a house that is sleeping. It was the silence of a battlefield after the last shot has been fired and the smoke is finally clearing. I stood in the foyer for a long moment, listening to the absence of their voices. No more complaints about the heating. No more demands for credit limit increases. No more fake laughter at my expense. The air conditioner hummed a low, steady rhythm, and for the first time in 20 years, the air in my own home felt breathable. I turned to Mercer. He was packing his laptop into his leather briefcase, his movements precise and efficient. He did not look like a man who had just dismantled a family. He looked like a surgeon scrubbing out after a successful operation. The police have the digital evidence, Mercer said, snapping the clasps of his case. The restraining orders will be served to them in holding. The locks have been rekeyed electronically, and the alarm codes are reset. The forensic accounting team will be here at noon to begin the asset seizure on the household accounts. Thank you, Mercer, I said. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a check I had written 3 days ago. It was a substantial bonus. Mercer took it without looking at the number. He tucked it into his pocket. It is done, Garrison. You are a free man. I will handle the press. You just worry about catching your flight. He nodded once, a professional acknowledgement of a job well executed, and walked out the side door to his waiting town car. I looked at the 2 private security guards who were still standing at attention near the archway. They were big men professionals who had seen worse things than a spoiled family getting evicted. You gentlemen can stand down, I said. The house is secure. Take a bonus from the petty cash in the safe on your way out. Merry Christmas. They nodded and left quietly, disappearing into the service corridor. I was alone. I walked slowly through the ground floor. I ran my hand along the back of the sofa where Cynthia had sat weeping only minutes ago. I looked at the spot on the rug where my son had knelt and begged for money. I looked at the fireplace where Brittany had flicked her cigarette ash. I waited for the sadness to hit me. I waited for the guilt. I waited for that pang of regret that fathers are supposed to feel when they exile their own blood. But it never came. Instead, I felt lighter. I felt a physical sensation of release in my chest, as if a heavy stone had been lifted off my ribs. It was the specific medical relief of a patient who wakes up from surgery to be told the tumor is gone. The procedure was painful. The recovery would be long. But the thing that was killing me was out. The rot had been cut away. I looked at the family portraits on the wall, the smiling faces of people who secretly hated me, the posed holidays, the lies framed in gold leaf. I did not take them down. I did not smash them. I left them there. They were not my memories anymore. They were part of the inventory. I walked to the coat closet near the entryway. I did not reach for my heavy winter coat. I reached for the vintage leather suitcase I had packed 2 days ago. It was battered and scuffed, a relic from my days traveling the world building my company. It contained 3 suits a week of casual clothes and my passport. I did not pack the Patek Philippe watch. I did not pack the family albums. I did not pack anything that belonged to the life of Garrison Ford, the difficult old man in Chicago. I gripped the leather handle. It felt cool and solid in my hand. The weight was familiar. It was the weight of a man who is ready to move. I took one last look at the grand empty house. It was a beautiful cage. But the door was finally open. The town car tires crunched over the salt and snow on the tarmac of the private airfield. It was a sound I had missed. For the last 5 years I had flown commercial, because Cynthia complained that private jets were bad for her carbon footprint image even though she drove a Range Rover. I stepped out of the car into the biting wind, but this time the cold did not bother me. It felt bracing. It felt like the air of departure. My Gulfstream G650 was waiting, engines spooling with a high-pitched whine that sounded like freedom. The pilot, Captain Miller, stood at the bottom of the stairs. He was a man I had hired 10 years ago, a man who knew how to fly through turbulence without spilling a drop of coffee. "Welcome back," Mr. Ford, Miller said, taking my battered suitcase. "We have a full tank and a flight plan filed for Florence." I nodded and climbed the stairs. The cabin smelled of fresh leather and lemons. There were no screaming arguments here. There were no demands for money. There was just quiet luxury and the promise of distance. I sat in my usual seat, the one on the right side facing forward. I pulled out my secure phone, the one I had used to destroy my old life. I had one last call to make. I dialed a number with a 39 country code. It rang 3 times before a deep voice answered in Italian. "Pronto. Alessandro, it is Garrison." Garrison, my friend, the voice boomed warm as the Tuscan sun. I did not think I would hear from you on Christmas. Is everything all right? Everything is perfect, Alessandro, I said, looking out the porthole at the gray skyline of Chicago. I am on the tarmac. I will be landing in Florence in 9 hours. Is the farmhouse ready? The farmhouse, Alessandro laughed. Garrison, it is a villa. And yes, it is ready. The fire is lit. The wine is breathing. The olive harvest was good this year. No one knows you are coming except me. Good, I said. Keep it that way. I am not Garrison Ford, the logistics mogul anymore. I am just an old man who wants to grow grapes and read books. We will have dinner on the terrace, Alessandro promised. Safe travels, my friend. I hung up the phone. I sat back and closed my eyes. It was ironic, really. Cynthia had spent the last year talking about how much she wanted to retire to Tuscany. She wanted to buy a villa with my money and fill it with her shallow friends. Now I was going to the very place she dreamed of, but I was going alone and I was going with my dignity intact. The stewardess placed a glass of champagne on the table. "We are ready for takeoff, Mr. Ford," she said softly. "Take us up," I said. The engines roared to life, pushing me back into the seat. The plane taxied to the runway and surged forward. I felt the wheels leave the ground. We climbed steeply, punching through the low-hanging gray clouds. I looked down one last time. Somewhere down there, in that sprawling grid of frozen streets and gray buildings, my wife was sitting in a holding cell, explaining to a public defender why she bribed a doctor. Somewhere down there, my son was walking in the snow looking for a temp agency. Somewhere down there was the wreckage of the life they tried to steal from me. We broke through the cloud layer into the brilliant, blinding sunshine of the upper atmosphere. The city was gone. The family was gone. I took a sip of champagne. It was cold and crisp. Goodbye, Chicago. The grease trap smell never really washes out of your pores. It was mid-July in Chicago, and the humidity was pressing down on the city like a wet wool blanket. But inside the kitchen of Burger Barn on Western Avenue, it was 10 degrees hotter. I wiped the sweat from my forehead with the back of my forearm, careful not to touch my face with my gloved hands. My name tag said Justin, but nobody here knew who Justin Ford was. Nobody knew about the trust fund or the penthouse or the black SUV. To the manager, a 19-year-old kid named Kyle, who took his job way too seriously, I was just the 38-year-old new guy who was slow on the fryer station. "Order up, Ford," Kyle yelled from the pass. "Stop daydreaming and drop the fries." I did not argue. I did not roll my eyes. I did not call my lawyer. I grabbed the basket of frozen potatoes and dropped them into the bubbling oil. "Yes, chef," I said automatically. It was a joke, but it was also a survival mechanism. 6 months ago, I would have thrown the basket at him. 6 months ago, I thought I was too good for labor. Now I knew exactly how much a dollar was worth, because I traded 60 seconds of my life for every 25 cents I earned. My shift ended at 4 p.m. I clocked out, punching the time card with a satisfying thud. My legs ached. My back hurt where I used to have a chiropractor to fix it. I walked out the back door into the alley, lighting a cigarette. Not a fancy import, but a cheap, generic brand that burned my throat. I walked the 6 blocks to my apartment. It was a studio in a building where the elevator had been broken since the 90s. I walked up the 4 flights of stairs, counting the steps. I stopped at the row of battered metal mailboxes in the lobby. I pulled out my key, the only key I owned now. Box 4B was usually empty or full of final notices for bills I was struggling to pay. Today, there was something different. Nestled between a flyer for a payday loan and an electric bill was a rectangle of thick, high-quality cardstock. I pulled it out. The stamp was Italian. The postmark was from a village in Tuscany I could not pronounce. I stood there in the dim lobby, smelling of stale cigarettes and floor wax, and stared at the picture. It was a photograph of a vineyard at sunset. Rows of gnarled grapevines stretched out over rolling hills bathed in golden light. In the distance there was a stone villa with a terracotta roof. It looked peaceful. It looked quiet. It looked like heaven. I flipped the card over. My heart hammered against my ribs. I expected a message. I expected a sermon. I expected a line about how I should have listened or a quote about responsibility, but the back of the card was blank. There was no signature, no love dad, no wish you were here, just the stark white space where words could have been. He did not need to write anything. The picture was the message. He was safe. He was free. And he was watching the sunset from a terrace he bought with the peace of mind he got from cutting us loose. I walked up to my apartment. It was hot inside. The window unit AC rattled and dripped water onto the linoleum floor. I poured myself a glass of tap water and drank it standing in the middle of my tiny kitchen. I looked at the rusted refrigerator, the one that hummed too loud, and had a door that did not quite seal. I took the postcard and a magnet I got from a pizza delivery place. I stuck the picture of the Tuscan vineyard right in the center of the fridge door at eye level. It was a window into a life I used to think I deserved. Now I knew it was a life I had to earn. I looked at the golden hills and the stone house. I touched the glossy surface of the card. "Nice place, old man," I whispered to the empty room. I took a bite of a leftover sandwich. It was stale. It was cheap. But I bought it with my own money. And for the first time in 38 years, I smiled a real smile. It was sad, and it was tired, but it was mine. The mirror in the communal bathroom was a scratched piece of polished steel bolted to the cinder block wall. It distorted everything, making my face look stretched and wide, but even the poor reflection could not hide the truth. I looked at the woman staring back at me, and I did not know her. 6 months ago, I was Cynthia Ford, the wife of a Chicago mogul. I had a weekly appointment with a colorist who charged $300 to hide the gray. I had a dermatologist who injected fillers into my smile lines. I had creams made from crushed pearls. Now I had a bar of lye soap that smelled like industrial disinfectant. I touched my hair. The gray was not just showing, it was taking over. A broad stripe of iron-colored frizz had grown out from the roots, creating a harsh line against the faded blonde that remained. The stress of the trial and the sentencing had accelerated time. I did not look 45. I looked 60. The skin around my jaw had slackened. The light in my eyes had gone out, replaced by a dull, flat look of perpetual exhaustion. I walked back to the day room, my plastic sandals slapping against the concrete floor. It was lunchtime. The menu was a scoop of gray tuna salad and a slice of dry bread. I sat at a metal table near the corner, trying to keep my back to the wall. "You have to listen to me," I said to the woman sitting across from me. Her name was Tasha, and she was in for armed robbery. She was chewing with her mouth open, staring at me with dead eyes. "He set me up," I insisted, leaning forward. "My husband. He is a billionaire. He paid the doctor to lie. He paid the police to plant the evidence. I am not supposed to be here. I am a victim of a very powerful, very vindictive man." Tasha stopped chewing. She swallowed slowly and looked at me with a mixture of pity and annoyance. "Cynthia, give it a rest," she said. "We have heard this story every day for 6 months. The billionaire, the villa in Italy, the conspiracy." "It is true," I pleaded, my voice rising to a shrill whine. "I had a fur coat worth more than your life. I had drivers. I had status. He took it all because he was jealous. He was losing his mind, Tasha. He was senile. I was just trying to help him. I was trying to get him into a nice facility where he could be safe." Tasha laughed. It was a harsh barking sound that drew looks from the other tables. "Lady, you are delusional," she said. "You are not a socialite. You are inmate number 749. You are eating the same slop as the rest of us. If you were really innocent, your rich husband would have hired a better lawyer. Face it. You got caught with your hand in the cookie jar and the lid slammed shut. She stood up, taking her tray and walking away, leaving me alone at the table. I looked around the room. The paint was peeling in long strips from the ceiling. The air smelled of sweat and boiled cabbage. The noise was constant, a low roar of shouting and clanging doors that never stopped, not even at night. A chill went through me that had nothing to do with the draft events. I remembered the brochure for the facility in North Dakota, the one I had shown Gavin on the balcony. Secure unit. No visitors for 30 days. State-mandated diet. Minimal recreation. I wanted to put him in a box. I wanted to strip him of his dignity, his name, and his freedom, so I could spend his money in the sun. I looked down at my hands. They were rough and dry, the manicure long gone. I realized then that the universe has a sick sense of humor. I was not going to Tuscany. I was not going to be the grieving widow in black silk. I was going to rot in this concrete box. I was going to grow old and die surrounded by strangers who did not care about my name. I had built a prison for my husband, and then I had walked right inside and locked the door behind me. The Tuscan sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and burnt orange. It is a warmth that penetrates deep into the bones, thawing the chill that sat in my chest for so many years. I sit on the stone terrace of the villa, a heavy crystal glass of Sangiovese resting in my hand. The air smells of wild rosemary and baking earth, not the exhaust and desperation of the city I left behind. Silence is a luxury I can finally afford. For decades, my life was a cacophony of demands. Garrison, we need more. Garrison, fix this. Garrison, you are so unreasonable. I can still hear their voices sometimes like ghosts caught in a draft. Cynthia screeching about her status. Justin whining about his debts. Brittany sneering about my longevity. They are fading now. Their voices are getting quieter every day, drowned out by the wind in the cypress trees and the chirping of the cicadas. I know what they tell people about me. I know the story they spin in the prison yard or the break room of the warehouse. They say I am a monster. They say I am a vindictive old tyrant who snapped on Christmas Eve and destroyed his own bloodline for sport. They tell themselves these lies because the truth is too sharp to swallow. They need me to be the villain so they can remain the victims. But I was never the villain. I was the dam holding back the river. I stood between them and the consequences of their own actions for 30 years. I absorbed their failures. I paid for their sins. I let them believe that money was a magic trick that never ended. My only crime was that finally I stepped aside. I let the water flow. I let gravity take over. And when they drowned, it was not because I pushed them under. It was because they never learned how to swim. I lift the glass to the light, watching the ruby liquid swirl. It is a good vintage, complex, robust, unapologetic. Just like the choice I made. They called me difficult. They whispered it at dinner parties and shouted it in my face. But they were wrong. I was never difficult. I was just fair. And the thing about fairness that nobody tells you is that it does not care about your feelings. It only cares about the balance. It demands that the ledger is squared. And sometimes absolute fairness is the most cruel thing in the world. I take a sip. The wine is perfect. The sun is gone. The world is quiet. I am done. The tragedy of the Ford family serves as a stark reminder that entitlement is a slow poison that eventually kills the host. Cynthia and Justin mistook silence for weakness and generosity for an endless right, forgetting that the hand that feeds can also close the door. Garrison's story teaches us that true worth isn't found in a trust fund or a title, but in the integrity of one's own character. When we treat people merely as obstacles to our own comfort, we invite our own destruction. Ultimately, the most painful lesson and the most necessary one is that actions have consequences, and no amount of money can buy back the trust you willingly threw away. If you enjoyed this story of cold justice and retribution, hit that like button and subscribe for more gripping tales, and let us know in the comments. Do you think Garrison went too far, or did his family get exactly what they deserved?